In the wake of the political violence we're seeing in America, a conversation with former California Congressmember David Dreier. Hear about his efforts to promote civility in our nation. In the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination and other political violence, including 2 assassination attempts on Donald Trump, the assassination of Democratic former Minnesota House Speaker Melissa Harman and her husband, and the attempt to burn down the home of Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, the question now is what needs to be done to stop the political violence? Well, today we're turning to David Dreier for some answers. He spent 32 years as a Republican in Congress, representing several areas east of Los Angeles. Today he oversees the Dreier Roundtable at Claremont McKenna College. It's a program dedicated to encouraging public service and embracing dialogue and diversity of opinions. Included in that is the annual Dreier Roundtable Civility Award. Now, to share more, David Dreier himself. Thank you for taking the time, Mr. Congressman, here on Inside California Politics. Great to have you.
Well, I will say, Eitan, this despicable act is what brought us together, but I'm happy that you and I are going to have an opportunity to look forward. The fact is, to have a young father who is, just so sadly taken away from us is very, very, very unfortunate. But I'm hoping and praying that we are going to be able to find some good from this. And I know that Charlie Kirk would want this. People, Democrats and Republicans alike, would want this. And I hope and pray that this can, in fact, as Governor Spencer Cox said so well, be a watershed moment, which is what he said Friday morning at the press conference that they had announcing that they'd captured the suspect.
Very well stated. And that is a good transition to talk about the Dreier Roundtable. Can you share a little bit about what the Roundtable is all about and the specific award on civility? What is your vision with this?
So, Eitan, before you were born, I went to the Congress. I spent virtually my entire adult life in the Congress, went in with Ronald Reagan in 1980 and left just over a decade ago. And when I did so, I said, we need to do everything we can to encourage smart, honest, hardworking, well-educated, ethical people into public service. And it began by talking about people potentially, running for elective office, serving in the Foreign Service. And since I got into the media business myself, I also expanded that to journalists. So I consider you to be a public servant, as many of your colleagues, as all your colleagues are who are in the journalism field. But one of the things that we did is we put together Oxford-style debates. Over the last several years, there have been really vigorous, debates on campus, challenges, and people confronted, people blocked from speaking. And so one of the things that we did at the Dreier Roundtable was to say the imperative of having Oxford-style debates where both sides of an issue. We've talked about drug legalization, trade, immigration, a wide range of issues. And we're continuing to do that so that people can be heard equally on each side. We need to recognize civil discourse. And again, it's unfortunate that we have to recognize it because when I was there, that was really more the norm, Eitan, than the exception.
Utah Governor Republican Spencer Cox was the most recent recipient of this special civility award from the Dreier Roundtable. Now, this is timely given Cox's prominent role at press conferences in the aftermath of Kirk's assassination. Here's what Cox had to say just after authorities announced they have a suspect in custody.
The problem with political violence is it metastasizes because we can always point the finger at the other side. And at some point, we have to find an off-ramp, or it's going to get much, much worse.
Important to note, Cox also spoke out following the assassination of former Minnesota House Speaker, Democrat Melissa Harman, and her husband earlier this summer. Now, the Civility Award was given to him before any of this happened. You saw something in him beyond politics. What is that?
We have given the award, interestingly enough, to governors. The most recent recipients, actually there are 2 of them. Governor Spencer Cox, and he has come to, tragically, national attention after what's just happened this week. Jared Polis, who is the governor of Colorado. These 2 governors, Democrat and Republican, came together to establish an effort at the National Governors Association called Disagree Better. Meaning, obviously, there needs to be a clash of ideas, which is what James Madison envisaged. But at the end of the day, Ronald Reagan famously said, Show me somebody who disagrees with me 20% of the time, and I'll show you somebody who agrees with me 80% of the time. And so there needs to be a resolution to issues after that clash of ideas, but also civil discourse is something that needs to be encouraged following that clash of ideas. And that's the reason that both of them were the recipients jointly of the Dreier Roundtable Civility Award.
The assassination of Charlie Kirk and other political violence we've seen. What can and should we as a country do to combat political violence?
People with whom you disagree, try to engage in civil discourse with them. So one example, something that we did, Eitan, in the Congress years ago, I was just reminded of this. You know how when we have the State of the Union message, the Republicans are on one side, the Democrats are on another? Several years ago, we decided that we would have, for lack of a better term, a buddy system. And so I would normally sit at the Republican leadership table for the State of the Union message. What we did for this State of the Union message is I went and I sat with Maxine Waters and Jane Harman, two of my Democratic colleagues. And so little things like that can send a positive signal. It's important to set leadership, for the leadership to step forward. So doing things like this, having a bipartisan congressional retreat with Democrats and Republicans, doing what you can to have people, when we have State of the Union messages, sit together. Little things like that can send a positive signal, because I find overwhelmingly, and I'm very passionate. I mean, I am a Reagan Republican and passionate about my views, but at the same time, I represented Los Angeles. I was one of the very few Republicans from the Los Angeles area. I had to work with Democrats constantly, and I enjoyed that. And that doesn't mean that you have to agree all the time, and you shouldn't agree all the time. But at the same time, at the end of the day, there needs to be a resolution.
You're the former chair of Tribune Publishing, previously in charge of major newspapers, including the LA Times, Baltimore Sun, Chicago Tribune, New York Daily News, many others. Well, now you're the founder and chairman of the Fallen Journalist Memorial Foundation. Now, this effort will create Washington, D.C.'s first memorial on the National Mall, specifically to celebrate the First Amendment and honor journalists who've died in the pursuit of truth. So share your vision here. How does this tie into what we're seeing now with acts of violence as a response to political speech?
Well, it was a tragedy that inspired me to do this, Eitan. In June 28th of 2018, a gunman who was unhappy with the news reporting in one of our newspapers, the oldest newspaper in America, first published in 1727, the Capital Gazette in Annapolis, Maryland. He went into the newsroom and sprayed it, killing 5 of the people who worked for us. It's the deadliest assault in U.S. history against journalists, the deadliest assault against journalists in the history of the United States of America. And so I said, on the National Mall, we have memorials about individuals: George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King, Franklin Roosevelt, or events, the World War II Memorial, the Vietnam Memorial. This will be the first memorial, Eitan, that is actually about an idea. And that idea is the freedom of the press, and the press freedoms that are enshrined in that amendment, and to recognize that we had those 5 people who worked for us at Tribune who were tragically killed in 2018. And we've seen, obviously, in the wars with Hamas and Israel and Ukraine, most recently, journalists who have been killed. And so recognizing, and as I said at the outset here, Eitan, journalists are public servants. They work tirelessly. You work tirelessly to make sure that news and information is available for the American people. Thomas Jefferson talked about the importance of an electorate, and he also talked about the importance of journalism. He said, if given a choice of living in a nation with government and no newspapers, or newspapers and no government, I choose the latter. That's how important the framers of our Constitution found this. And James Madison, famously the lead author of the Constitution, was another one who focused passionately on this. He said, to the press alone, checkered as it is with abuses, the world is indebted for all the triumphs that have been gained by reason and humanity over error and oppression. So when we think about, Charlie Kirk, by utilization of the media, was able to build the kind of support that he did. And one of the things I was most impressed with in the aftermath of his tragic death was the last two people who were getting ready to question him, and they both talked about the fact that they vigorously disagreed with Charlie Kirk, but they appreciated the fact that he was open and willing to engage in this kind of discourse, with a headline above his on the tent there saying, "Prove me wrong."
You know what? That is such an important message. We so appreciate you coming on. And by the way, I should mention, former Congressman Dreier is behind a new nonprofit news magazine, LA Reported, all about the need for local journalism. Former Congressman David Dreier, thank you so much for taking the time here on Inside California Politics.
Thank you very much, and rest in peace to Charlie Kirk.